The Lunch Bunch, Kindie Keeners, Chapter 21, May, Putting It Together. The Sneaky Spy Saturday library meeting started at 9 a.m. They were instructed to meet in a separate room called the Cottonwood Room. It was named after the hundreds of cottonwood trees in the area. Frances asked Mrs. Dewberry if she could call Detective Callahan to join them at the library. "Oh my, no, Frances," replied Mrs. Dewberry without hesitation. "He is a busy man and doesn't have time to meet Saturdays at the library. Besides, I have made myself quite familiar with the case and can probably answer your questions." Brandon asked, "Mrs. Dewberry, was the school being constructed at the same time that the robbery occurred? I think they were both 3 years ago, but I wondered if they happened at the same time." Mrs. Dewberry frowned. "They were." "What were you thinking, Brandon?" she asked. Could the robbers have worked on the building crew? He wondered. "I will write that down for Detective Callahan and see if they cleared the workers." "Great thinking, Brandon." Pooja asked, "What about the Patrick family, and especially Mr. Patrick? Could he be a suspect?" The detectives checked out the Patrick family first, she explained. "Sometimes a robbery is staged to collect insurance on the items." "Wait," interrupted Ashley. "What is insurance?" Mrs. Dewberry explained. "Adults buy insurance on expensive items like cars, houses, and jewelry. If something happens to the items, like theft or damage, the owner gets the value of the item back. For Mr. and Mrs. Patrick to be so interested in the Cold Case Crime Club, it worried me that they were simply looking for information to see if we viewed them as suspects." Ashley looked at Brandon and nodded in agreement. "I took that question to the detective when I first found out about the case," Mrs. Dewberry explained. "The Patricks were out of town and had a solid alibi. Detective Callahan thought their interest in the case was genuine, and they truly wanted to find the missing family heirlooms." Andrew confirmed, "The Patricks are off the suspect list, team." "Where did they find the star part of the missing jewelry?" Matthew asked Mrs. D. She rustled through the file. Let me see. "A place called the Pawn Palace in Sherwood Park, Alberta." "Where is Sherwood Park?" asked Frances. Again, Mrs. Dewberry searched the file. "Sherwood Park is about 25 minutes east of Edmonton." "That seems like a long way from Mountain Creek to get rid of evidence. Could the thieves live in Sherwood Park?" asked Brandon. "Maybe you're onto something again, Brandon," Mrs. D confirmed. Ashley chimed in. "I have an aunt who lives in Edmonton, and it's a 4-hour drive to visit her." Frances noticed Andrew quietly processing the conversation. "Andrew, did you have anything to ask Mrs. Dewberry?" wondered Frances. Andrew was carefully figuring out how Mrs. Dewberry and Leroy were involved. If the robbery took place 3 years ago, Mrs. Dewberry was not even in Mountain Creek. "Actually, I do." "Mrs. Dewberry, have you ever visited Mountain Creek before arriving last summer?" "Only in May of last year when we came to town on a house hunting trip. We bought our house a couple of months before we moved here." "Why do you ask?" she wondered. "No reason, just curious, I guess," he lied. As LB6 left the library, Mrs. Dewberry promised she would ask Detective Callahan about the construction workers and see if there were any updates from the Pawn Palace in Sherwood Park. Frances said, "Congratulations, team. I think we can take Mr. Patrick off the suspect list. I think we can take Mrs. Dewberry off the list as well. She wasn't even in Mountain Creek 3 years ago. But I am not sure about Leroy," said Andrew. The playground on Thursday was too busy after school to go into HQ through the walkway without being seen. "We need to have a team meeting. Let's find a quiet spot and take a few minutes and talk about our business without anybody hearing us," said Brandon. This Thursday, LB6 had some important decisions to make. Brandon started. "I am sure the thieves will go back to HQ to search for the stolen gems if they haven't already. What do you think about moving the gems again? They are still duct taped at various points along the walkway. If the thieves find one gem, it won't take them long to discover the rest." Matthew contributed, I agree that we need to move the gems. Where can we move them to? How will we get in to get them? It's so busy at the playground, we might get caught, said Francis. What do you think about this, team? Could we take them out of the walkway and bypass HQ? Is there any way in the library we could hide them? Wondered Ashley. The library has so many places to hide a small pouch. I'll bet we could find a spot close to the library door, agreed Pooja. Quietly, Andrew piped up. I think we should go into HQ from the library door ASAP to see if anybody has been back. We can quickly look for a good hiding spot on our way through the library. The only problem we have now is to know when we can run the operation. Everybody be on high alert for a chance to move the gems. Also, what do you think about testing Leroy to see if he gives us any information to move him up the suspect list or take him off of it? What do you have in mind, Andrew? Wondered Brandon. Why don't we include him in the next operation? Let's put him on hall surveillance outside the library. He can divert anybody who wants to go into the library from the opposite end of the school. Then, when we exit HQ, we can ask him a fake question to see how he answers. If he completes the test, we know we can trust him. Brilliant plan, Andrew. That's exactly what I was thinking, said Francis. Matthew rolled his eyes. With that, the lunch bunch scattered for an hour of playground shenanigans. The perfect opportunity arrived the very next day on Friday, when the elementary students and staff would be in the gym for the annual Spring Fling. The Spring Fling was a dance held in the gym for 2 hours after lunch, complete with a disc jockey and a disco ball. Students danced to the familiar tunes and remembered and practiced their dances from the family dance in February. It would be a first for the Kindies, and it was another tradition enjoyed by all the elementary students at Mountain Creek School. Brandon and Andrew called an LB6 meeting for the second recess. Brandon asked, who thinks we could do the gym recovery mission this afternoon during the dance? Could we make that work? Andrew continued, I think we can sneak into HQ during the dance to recover the gems and hide them in a new spot. We will need all eyes on the adults to make sure we can sneak out of the gym and get back without being noticed. This will be a team mission. Brandon finished by saying, we won't know exactly what your lookout jobs in the gym will be until the dance starts. If you agree, we can give this a try. Hands in. 6 little hands shot out in the middle of the circle as 6 little voices chanted, LB6. Let's approach Leroy and see if he's in, reminded Andrew. Frances led the team to where Leroy was reading. Leroy? Hello, she called. Oh, hi, Lunch Bunch, he said as he looked up from his book. Brandon took over the conversation so it would be quick and they could play. Leroy, we need your help. Brandon lowered his voice and LB6 circled around him. We're going into HQ during the spring fling and need you to be a lookout in the hall outside the library. Why are you going into HQ? Asked Leroy. Andrew and Brandon are going in to see what supplies and furniture we need to make it a true HQ, fibbed Pooja. I don't know. I don't want to get into any trouble, Leroy stammered. It will be fast, and we won't get caught, said Matthew. It was the first invitation from friends that Leroy had in a long time. Okay, he agreed. Andrew proceeded to tell him the plan quickly, minus the part about the gems. It was all systems go for this afternoon. Mrs. Shaw was on the microphone. Welcome to the annual Spring Fling. We are excited to get the afternoon started, so I will only take a quick moment to announce a housekeeping reminder. Please remember that the playground equipment will be closed for 3 days next week while the construction crew finishes up the maintenance work. Stay away from the area and let the crew get their work finished. Have fun this afternoon, and remember, dancing only at the spring fling. No running, kids. The disc jockey got the music going, and the students immediately started to dance. Andrew saw that Miss Piper, the librarian, was in the gym, so he knew they were safe to go into the storage room. The team waved over Leroy and met in a corner of the gym, and Brandon led the conversation. Pooja and Matthew, you keep your eyes on Miss Piper to make sure she doesn't head back to the library and catch us red-handed in the storage room. Got it, Brandon, said Pooja. We're on it, acknowledged Matthew. Francis and Ashley, keep watch of the teachers leaving the gym in partners or small groups who look like they're looking for something suspicious. Leroy, you hang around outside the library doors. If anybody comes, get them away from the library. I don't know if I'm the best person for this job, he whined nervously. Come on, focus, Leroy. You've got this, said Francis impatiently. They gave each other a thumbs up. Ashley and Brandon decided it was time to make their bathroom run. Each left through a different door in the gym and ran to the library. Leroy followed Brandon and slowly made his way to the library. He hovered back and forth slowly and watched. Brandon was a bit ahead of Andrew, so he waved him into the library. Once in the library, Brandon led the way to the library storage room. We go through here, Andrew, whispered Brandon. They crawled through the small door and were inside HQ in no time. Brandon turned on the trouble light so Andrew could see the mess the intruders made of their room. Brandon whispered, I don't think anybody has been back. Let's get the gems. Okay, Brandon, let's make this fast, urged Andrew. Brandon grabbed the flashlight and led the way into the walkway with Andrew close behind him. The gems were taped in the same spot, so they were easy to pull off. Andrew counted the gems as they pulled them off the wall. 1, 2, 3. Okay, over here are 4 and 5. We have them. What about the spoon, Brandon? I have it right here. We have everything. Hurry, Andrew, before anybody notices we're missing. Grab the duct tape on the way back through HQ. I think we can hide the gems in the library storage room, stated Brandon. Andrew and Brandon put all 5 gems with the spoon in the pouch and shut off the trouble light. Andrew had 2 strips of duct tape ripped, and Brandon quickly found a lower cupboard in the storage room. They taped the pouch to the underside of the lower shelf in the cupboard. Now, to get back to the gym without being seen. Pooja and Matthew were watching Miss Piper. What do you think is taking them so long? Shouldn't they be back by now, wondered Pooja. Pooja, look, Miss Piper is leaving the gym, hissed Matthew. We have to follow her and distract her from going to the library. They quickly caught up to her, and Matthew gestured and mouthed that it looked like she was going to the library. Pooja gave him the sign for "We are okay," which was both hands on her shoulders. Matthew immediately understood and knew Pooja had a plan. They followed Miss Piper down the hall to the library. Excuse me, Miss Piper, said Pooja. We're having trouble finding our way back to the gym. We left the gym to get a drink of water. Can you please take us back to the gym? Of course I can. I was going to the library to get a drink of water myself. Let's get you both back to the gym now so you don't miss any more of the dancing fun, she said. Miss Piper spun around and led Matthew and Pooja right back the way they came. Matthew tried to stall by asking, Miss Piper, if we were to need another drink, where would the closest drinking fountain be? Probably the best one is right by the front doors of the gym. I'll show you. They walked to the front doors, and Miss Piper pointed out the convenient water fountain. We're back now, kids. Enjoy your dance, and I'll be right back after I get my own drink of water. Meanwhile, Brandon and Andrew exited the library and saw Leroy wandering slowly up and down the hall, keeping watch. They flagged him to get back to the gym. On the way back to their separate gym doors, Andrew joined Leroy, and they walked together. Andrew chucked the roll of duct tape into the school garbage can. They noticed Matthew and Pooja having a conversation with Ms. Piper. How did it go in HQ, Andrew? Asked Leroy. Great, Leroy. We moved some desks and chairs around and figured out what we needed, he lied. I was only inside the one time I put the message in there. I didn't know you had desks and chairs. There were only stools. I will not be going in again. It's too dark, he said firmly. What do you mean it's too dark? You knew there was a trouble light, replied Andrew. Leroy looked at the floor and blushed. I might be in grade 3, but I'm afraid of the dark. It took me too long to turn it on when I was inside. I was scared to death. Why do you think I read during the day at recess? He confided to Andrew. Leroy, I saw you and Mrs. Dewberry having a conversation at the office a while back, commented Andrew. Mrs. Dewberry makes regular book deliveries from the big library to the school library. She picks up and drops off a couple times a week. She ordered a Hardy Boys mystery that her library just got and wanted me to have it first, he explained. Why were you whispering? Wondered Andrew. Ms. Dayton shushed us because she is always on the phone. Meanwhile, Brandon went in his door and immediately searched out the rest of the team. He was smiling from ear to ear and gave each of the LB6 a thumbs up when he saw them. Pooja and Matthew used their "We are okay" signal for the second time that afternoon. Leroy retreated to his place on the wall, and Pooja moved to hers in the middle of the gym dance floor. She danced like no one was watching and inspired those around her to move to the music. Ashley joined the dancing fun. Even the awkward but confident Frances busted some moves. Andrew told Brandon and Matthew, we can for sure take Leroy off the suspect list. He can be trusted. They would pass that info on to the other LB6 agents. As the children were dismissed and connecting with their parents, Frances noticed the construction crew van drive into the parking lot.